And you're recording.
All righty, I'd like to call the meeting of the Bridgewater Town Council to order. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty, I don't have any announcements in regards to condolences, so I'd like to take a moment of silence for any veterans or first responders who have passed. Thank you. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 38, paragraph 18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, the meeting of the Bridgewater Town Council will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. There will be no in-person attendance permitted. Citizens who wish to tune into the meeting may do so via Facebook Live. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the September 8th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay. We don't, no announcements from the president, no proclamations. Citizens open forum. Again, I ask for people to stay within 3 minutes. Do we have any citizens who would like to participate in citizens open forum? And I don't see anybody, do you?
1 second, let me just double check. I do not.
Okay. We do have one appointment tonight for the Charter Review Committee, Janet Hanson. I'll entertain a motion to approve Janet Hanson for the
So moved.
CRC.
Motion to
I'll make
approve.
it. Second it.
We got a motion, a second. Any discussion? Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Rushton?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Personally like to thank not only Mrs. Hanson, but we had other people that raised their hand for the position as well. So thank you to everyone. Okay, we don't have any hearings. We don't have any license transactions. We don't have any presentations. We'll move right to the town manager's report. First item is Mitchell School update.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mitchell School update. I don't have anything of substance that is new. The 100% design plans are being completed this month. And the last meeting a week ago, Monday, of the school committee, school building committee reviewed the HVAC alternatives in a lot more detail, which is somewhat timely right now, given the COVID issues surrounding airborne particles and so forth. So the committee hashed that out pretty well. As I said, 100% design plans are being completed this month. It'll then go out to bid in late October, November, and assuming all goes well with that, will be awarded, and construction should begin in December with a July 2022 completion date. For anybody interested, the next Mitchell School Building Committee meeting is Monday, September 28th at 5:30. And as I often, all the time say, if anybody needs any information, they can get it at www.bridgewaterschoolproject.com. But that's all I have on the Mitchell tonight. I'm happy to answer
Mr.
questions.
President,
Yes, Mr. Fitzgibbons.
just to confirm some of my standing questions on this matter with the town manager, we're still on budget, we're still on time.
Still on time, still on budget. Everything.
The 100% drawings don't contemplate any increase in needs for funds,
No,
even with the HVAC discussion that was had.
correct. Right now, all of the indicators point towards being able to build that into the total budget for the school, and there's right now no need for any additional funds.
And just finally, I don't say enough about the website, but it's a great resource for people, and you mention it all the time, and I appreciate that. There's no reason for people to feel like they don't have enough information about what's going on, in my opinion, about this project. It's all out there. It's all there for you to find. If you need help, I'm sure people would be willing to help you find it and figure it out. So I appreciate all the work that the building committee's done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, FY21 revenue versus budget.
Revenue, it's still, I think last week or last meeting, I reported that it was a little too early to draw any conclusions. That's true again this week. We just don't have any significant revenues due us right now to be able to draw firm conclusions on or make general statements about whether we'll be high, low, or right on target. I can tell you that the governor and the state extended the payment and reporting date again for meals and lodging, so we won't actually have those numbers until after May of 2021. So originally it was September 20th, and the governor then extended that. So, and again, not that meals and lodging are enormous portions of our budget, but they are important pieces. So we are not expecting to have those number sets until May of next year. That said, our revised revenue figures are tracking right about what we anticipated. We are looking at it obviously very closely, but real estate and water and sewer billings are right about where we anticipated for this point. So, but as I say, we'll continue to keep very close watch on that. But that's all I have on that right now.
Mr.
Any
President,
questions? Go ahead, Mr. Fitzgibbons.
just through you to the town manager, if you could ask the finance director to just give us an idea, where obviously we've gone into a recession because of this COVID issue. I've read conflicting economists, believe it or not, economists conflict with each other, forecasts of, is it a U shape? Is it a V shape? What type of recession are we looking at? Just what his best thoughts are on that, because I think that generally is going to drive a lot of what the revenue, not only us as a town, but as a state as well, could anticipate. So his thoughts on that would be appreciated, because I know he follows it very closely. Thank you.
He does, and I will follow up with him and report back to the council, or ask him to come and do a mini finance report to the council.
Any other questions? Seeing none, COVID-19 update.
COVID-19 update. We have seen a little bit of a mini spike this week. We now have 10 active cases in Bridgewater. So we are tracking that carefully. I think, as I mentioned, the emergency team has for a long time has been meeting daily. We now are twice a week. And BSU, or sorry, Bridgewater Raynham School District and the school nurses and Rainham and Bridgewater meet now on a weekly basis right now to go over issues that may pop up. I can tell you we are submitting another reimbursement request rather from Plymouth County. We anticipate probably about a $500,000 reimbursement request within the next couple of weeks, and we're investigating a number of different options to make sure that we can maximize wisely maximize the use of the monies that have been set aside for us. So right now we are focused on technology, and we are looking at other areas that could use additional help and determining whether those are reimbursable expenses or not. So that is in the works. I think as the council knows, employees have been working in the Academy building according to a schedule, which has them either in the building or working from home. We are anticipating moving to an appointment-only model on October 5th for residents and folks that need to get in the building for some reason. But we will roll out some protocols prior to October 5th, but that's what we're targeting is October 5th. For folks to get into the building that for some reason need to get into the building. I would only caution that any changes to the state requirements and obviously any significant increase in COVID cases locally would probably affect that timeline, but excuse me, barring that, we're targeting October 5th. I will point out, and somebody pointed this out today, I think there is a perception out there that that nobody's working when they're not in the building. And I can tell you that actually that's contrary to that notion. And I've said it before, I'm quite proud of our group of administrative employees. They've been extremely diligent about making sure that the job gets done no matter what the hurdles in front of them. So they have been working quite hard. In fact, we really are one of the very few towns that never closed our operations due to COVID. Most towns had some period of closure, out and out closure. We were fortunate that we didn't skip a beat, and we carried on doing the people's work. So as I say, I'm quite proud of the group. Obviously, what's near and dear to the council is when can we get back into the Academy building council chambers? I know that's a matter of discussion. And as I pointed out, we are constrained a bit by occupancy and as well as technology. We are getting a shipment of technology. We are told it's coming in on the 28th of this month. Knock on wood. It actually appears on the 28th, but assuming that shipment is on time, we will be able to anticipate an in-person council meeting on October 6th. For those counselors that want to be in the chambers, we'll still be constrained by occupancy, so we cannot allow the public into the building, but certainly any counselors that would like to meet in the Academy building in the council chambers for the October 6th meeting should be able to do that. We will continue, obviously, since the public can't be in the room or in the building, we will continue to utilize Zoom, at least for the foreseeable future, for folks wanting to join the meeting as it's happening, and then of course Facebook for those that want to watch the meeting and don't necessarily want to participate. So that is what we're planning. Those are target dates, and as I say, we are anticipating no dramatic changes in those dates. But if something comes along unexpected, then please understand that those dates may have to change. But that's what we're targeting. Updates. Just a note, and I briefly touched on it. We do have our emergency team meetings on a twice weekly basis. Right now, we are also incorporating BSU, and we also have BR, Bridgewater, Rainham. It looks like at least a once a week meeting, joint meeting with the two towns and the school nurses and so forth and the health agents. that's already proved to be quite useful. It's an incredibly simple way to share information, but it's a critical way to share information so that everybody's on the same page. So I certainly thank the superintendent for that. I also, my thanks to President Clark at BSU for making sure that BSU is in lockstep with the town and vice versa. So they have done, I can tell you both organizations have done a tremendous job protecting their respective communities, and certainly the greater Bridgewater community from the effects of COVID, and they've done a good job planning for any possible future outbreak as well. So my hat's off to them. And that's really what I have on COVID. But as I said, happy to answer questions.
Any questions? Mr. Gallagher?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the town manager, there's a couple of questions. When there are staff that are working from home and there are staff that are working in the town hall, is it the same staff that are at home and the same staff that's in the building, or is it rotated where they switch off or something like that?
For the most part, it's rotated. We want to make sure that staff that is eligible and capable and able to get into the building on a routine basis. So we try to rotate people through as best we can.
Okay, thank you. The other question is when do you think the public will be allowed to come back in there freely, like instead of appointments? I mean, I would say we're one of the minority towns right now that don't allow the public into the buildings. There are towns that have the public coming in and will be doing early voting in the town hall as well. So I understand it's your call and you're being very cautious, which I'm grateful for, but I just think we're a little behind in allowing the public to come in with or without an appointment, that's all. But do you have a time frame on that? Because we are a town that has a very small percentage of cases or anything like that. I think we're a green town, or we're yellow, one of the colors. So what's your time frame? Even though we might be having a meeting on the 6th, whoever wants to, if that's possible, and whichever counselor wants to come into the building. But I just was wondering more about the public coming in. And I do agree with you. I know the work is getting done. Nothing is behind. People have been doing their work and they're doing a good job since this whole thing started. But I think I'm hearing more and more questions about what you're hearing is, are they in there? Are they working? I'm like, well, they're working. It's just that, the public isn't allowed in at this time.
Nope, those are great questions. And I think given, sort of a reopening to the public by appointment, at least on the 5th, I anticipate no more than right now, given our current circumstances, I would anticipate no more than 2 weeks of appointment only. And then at that point, assuming all goes well, and I trust it will, then we would be back open to the public. It'll be a little different. Quite frankly, the public won't have, as unfettered access into offices. But again, those are just some of the standard precautions that really everybody is taking. But that's sort of what I'm looking at as a timeline. So begin October 5th, and then 2 weeks after that, no more than 2 weeks after that, depending on how that goes, we open it right back up.
Right, and so final question. So when early voting starts at the middle of October, well, I know it starts on a Saturday, but during the weekday when there's early voting going on, will there be less of the usual staff in the town hall?
My guess is that there would be fewer staff than all the staff during the early voting periods. But again, we'll develop protocols so that it's pretty clear. I think we did a great job on early voting for the primary. Obviously, that was much lighter turnout than we'll probably see in the November election, certainly. But I think while it won't be in the same location, chances are at least we'll develop that same kind of pattern so that people are clear about how to come in, how to register, how to vote, how to exit the building.
All right, I'll ask more questions about that when we get to voting or the election. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other questions? So just to touch upon a couple things in regards to this. So Mr. Dutton and I had a very extensive conversation last Thursday, I believe, either Thursday or Friday. And my approach to the technology aspect is twofold. One, obviously under the current conditions, we need to have technology available to the town council, and also, availability to the residents, that we have started to see more and more residents get involved, quote unquote, using Zoom and having that medium, which we've received some really good feedback on that. So I think that's going to help us transition into a little bit more of the norm, I'll say. But also I'm a huge proponent of, hopefully by the time my term ends, we can get rid of all of this and have it electronically so that we're much more efficient, we're much more effective, and we also save a bunch of trees that we shouldn't be really killing with paper coming in, agendas and things of that nature. So we've had a great conversation, and if it goes according to plan, we'll have that first in-person meeting. But we also are very mindful that people have become very accustomed, and rightfully so, to this Facebook Live. So we'll try to keep this going so that we have the maximum amount of participation we could possibly have. Okay, update FY 2021 goals.
All right, Mr. President, let me tick through some of these. Obviously, these aren't all of them, but I do want to make sure that you are aware of the progress on some of these, because a lot of these will be coming at some point, coming before the council. So I want to just keep you up to speed. So the fire station feasibility process is underway. Excuse me, we are scheduling an October 5th meeting. The fire station building committee is scheduling an October 5th meeting to review the now completed space needs assessment, and they will begin the site selection process. Site selection process will be somewhat lengthy process, but that does not mean that the committee decides, yep, put it right there. It means that they review the data and they review the recommendations on general locations with the consultant. So that is where that stands, and that is underway. I'm quite pleased with the progress there. The old town hall feasibility study, as you recall, we had a feasibility study funded partially by the Massachusetts State Cultural Council. That has gone through quite a process. I'm quite pleased with the work that they have done. That is almost completed. They issued an interim report, which I think I shared with the council, and they will be issuing a final report on that. And that final report will be presented to the Bridgewater Cultural Council and also the Community and Economic Development Committee when that gets issued. So that is that one. Recruiting some key positions. So certainly understanding that well, certainly during this time period, the constantly changing regulations around personnel and labor and HR. We have been lucky enough to secure the services of both a payroll person and an HR generalist, both of whom are right now going through a lot of internal education, exceptional hires. Both have advanced degrees in their respective fields, and certainly have a lot of experience, which they bring to Bridgewater. So we are constantly working to enhance those areas where we know we lack. Obviously, that is one of them. and I'm very happy to report that we have been successful in that endeavor. We do have, just as a complete aside, the council may notice, or folks may notice, that there are a lot of position listings for Bridgewater. Those are not, for the most part, those are not brand new positions. Those are filling a number of vacancies we have in certainly water, sewer, highway, and so forth. So we have vacancies. A lot of those jobs are very challenging to recruit for, and so that hence you see a number of advertisements. So that's recruiting some of the key people. Also, our new water treatment plant and the new sewer plant, both are progressing roughly on, well, not roughly, they are progressing on time. The water treatment plant, we've awarded the construction contract to Waterline Construction out of New Hampshire, and that has actually already essentially broken ground. We've had pre-construction meetings. We've issued the order to proceed. So that is now underway. We anticipate an 18-month construction schedule, and we are that's what we wish for. We're budgeting for something slightly longer than that, but we are holding the contractor and the OPM to an 18-month construction schedule. So that is the water plant. That's a little bit ahead of the sewer plant upgrade. And as you know, our lawsuit with the EPA and the Department of Environmental Protection settlement stipulates that we have a certain timeline to meet on that. We have engineering in the works. We've done our affordability study is complete and filed with the EPA and DEP. And some of our preliminary engineering work has also been filed with the DEP in order for them to approve. So we are looking at, for both of these projects, we are looking at state revolving fund funding. We are very lucky that we secured funding for the water treatment plant, and it looks as if we'll also be able to secure some state revolving fund funding for the sewer plant. And we are working, obviously now our job is to make sure that we manage these projects excuse me, in such a way that we can get principal forgiveness in addition to the extremely low interest rate on these projects. So I will point out both these projects are currently being managed out of my office, but obviously we bring a team approach to all our projects, just about all our projects. So we're doing that, both these projects in collaboration with finance and engineering and HR and water and sewer and you name it. Everybody is sort of pitching in and contributing to the success of these, certainly these two projects, but really all the projects. And that's what I have for those. I'm happy to answer any questions on those.
Any questions for the town manager? Mr. Wood?
Two questions. Thank you. First of all, I was talking with a friend about the goals, and I can't find the goals on the webpage. So I was hoping that you could add the goals on maybe your page, the town manager's page.
Absolutely.
Visible. And then secondly, we were having a meeting the other night of the review committee, and there's an evaluation form. So I wanted to make sure you had a copy of the evaluation form because it's different than the goals as stated. So I just want to make sure you had a copy of that.
I will get a copy of that from the council clerk, certainly. I believe I have a copy, but I'll make sure I got a copy. And I'll definitely put if the goals aren't up there, I will definitely get those up on the town manager page.
All right, any other questions?
I have a couple questions. So
Mr. Gallagher?
So through you to Mr. Dutton, when you talked about those that have been hired and there's internal education, they're involved in internal education. Can you explain what internal education is to me?
Sure. We are, we obviously over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, we've developed a very, probably a very detailed process by which to do our finances. Payroll obviously plays an important part in the finance side, as does HR through the benefits, through the recruitment. So internally, we're the two employees right now are going through sort of education about how we do things, how we approach payroll, how we do accruals, how we do how we do benefits, how we do certain other aspects of things under that sort of HR umbrella. So that's really, I made it sound a little more like boot camp, but it's not quite boot camp. Just sort of educating on how Bridgewater is doing things, and some of those may differ from the way the processes that they are used to.
Thank you. When you advertise for positions, where do you do most of your advertising for open positions?
That's a very good question, because traditionally our advertising has been very limited, and not in any kind of good way. So we've expanded that, but I can get you an exact list. I know we do a lot of advertising in particular trade publications or trade within trade groups. We do some with the MMA. We do some we do through monster.com. There are a number of different ways that we do that we advertise, but I can certainly get a more comprehensive list. I just don't have it in front of me.
I mean, I look at MMA quite a bit, and I never see anything from Bridgewater on there. So I think that's a very good tool to use. But anyway, thank you.
I think it depends. I'll only add, I think it depends on the position that we're looking to fill. Obviously right now we've got advertising out for laborers within the highway department, and that's MMA is I agree with you, is a great place. Probably not though for highway laborers, as an example.
True. Yeah.
All
right, any other questions? Alrighty, moving on to maintenance of town buildings.
All right, maintenance of town buildings. Let me just give you a very quick run through on this. I want to be quite clear. Obviously, town buildings, for some reason, this seems to be a hot button issue. And we know that, I think everybody that works in Bridgewater knows that it's a priority of mine. But let me give you where we are right now. So overall, the condition of our buildings overall is okay. It's good, not great, but good overall. Obviously, buildings always need attention, and we're quite cognizant of that. And we sort of have approached our efforts to maintain buildings with that in mind. Right now, we are changing over. It's the season to change over from cooling to heating. We're in the process of doing that. We do boiler inspections. We've have all the buildings cleaned on a regular basis, and all the buildings are reviewed by the department heads to make sure that there are no dramatic issues. We have budgeted for, quite frankly, very basic building needs, and we need to do a lot more. But I can tell you that we budget, multiple times more than we were, say, 5 years ago. So that is we're not there yet, but we're getting there little by little. In terms of current practices for building maintenance, most of our building maintenance is handled through, as I mentioned, through the respective department heads, and it's been that way for decades. Our interim / temporary facilities manager has been, quite frankly, an invaluable resource for the department heads to keep on top of the respective needs for their buildings. But again, we use a team approach for caring for all our buildings, much as we do when we have a big project. We have much more communication than we used to amongst department heads. And certainly with Rob, who has graciously stepped in on an interim basis just to make sure things are coordinated as well as possible. So we need more budgeted money. That's obvious, and we're certainly not fully funded in that regard. But that's kind of where we are. So, for example, in terms of coordinating better, we try to do elevator maintenance, elevator inspections with a team approach. We try to do floor cleaning, filter changes that I mentioned, and so those are some of the things that we better coordinate now than we did before. So anytime you can better coordinate these throughout all of the facilities in town, the less expensive it's going to ultimately be to get that work done. We also have done smaller projects. The senior center has seen some very smaller projects, mostly repair projects that have been coordinated. And certainly highway offices and bathrooms and lockers were updated. Bathrooms had to be repaired. We didn't even know that they were actually, many of them were broken. So we were able to get those repaired, and they're up and running and much better than they were. So where are we going to go? Where are we going to go with how we deal with building maintenance, and how are we going to make our current practices better? Honestly, we had anticipated hiring a facilities manager prior to COVID, well over a year ago, 2 years ago, who would oversee all our buildings and maintenance needs. And we did, when we advertised, I believe we got one qualified applicant who ended up taking a job elsewhere in the private sector. And then April came and COVID came, and we had to delay the hiring of that position until we really knew what our budget would look like for FY, this fiscal year and beyond. Now we have a little bit better, we're a little bit better grounded, and we've designed a position that we are confident with, that will serve the needs of the buildings and the people in town, and we're re-advertising for that. So I will say, I'll really drive home the point that was obvious to me well over a year ago, and it's very hard to fill this position. It really requires complex knowledge of building systems, complex knowledge of construction management, and requires experience really in both of those areas and an assortment of other areas. So it is a challenging job to fill, but we're back at it, and we seem to have done a pretty good job recruiting key positions so far. I know it's time consuming, but as I've very often said, I'd rather take the time to do it right than do it wrong and then pay for the consequences. So this is one that I want to make sure we do right, and I trust we will get it right. What's an expected time frame on how we get there? I think once we get the right candidate on board, the first thing that person's going to do is spearhead the townwide assessment of all the buildings that I've talked about before, and prioritize maintenance, repair, and replacement needs to the extent that that's necessary. And we'll certainly, if that requires additional appropriation, more than the council has already appropriated, then we'll be back looking for that amount once we get an exact figure there. So that is, so that's really it. I think what we're contemplating is that facilities person would really take over my office's oversight of some of the more complex facilities, such as the building of the water treatment plant and the sewer treatment plant. Obviously, I oversee, will oversee it, but I wouldn't take as active a role in that once we get a facilities person on board. So I think that's sort of where we are. I know it's been a long time coming. I am very attentive to the fact that we don't want to let any buildings that we own fall down, certainly, or get into a state of such disrepair that they're beyond the affordable maintenance, and so that is high on my list. And as I say, I think everybody that works in Bridgewater knows that that's high on the list. So that's sort of what I have there. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Chase?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the town manager. Mr. Dutton, I just have a specific question as to the memorial building.
Mhm.
And I've been led to understand that there are moisture issues currently, some of which might be attributable to the HVAC system, or in fact, to more routine, more easily remedied matters like gutters, the cleaning of gutters. I understand that there are issues that have caused water penetration into the basement, that there's some possibility of floors buckling because of water, interior issues in the building. And I'm just wondering if you have information on these kinds of problems in that particular facility.
I do. I can tell you that the floors have been buckling since at least as long as I've been here. The floors, there is a buckle in both the downstairs and the upstairs floors. I don't believe any of the any moisture related issues are related to the HVAC though. The HVAC system is new to that building. Well, new as of about 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And there is a lot of moisture in the lower level. That's again also been there certainly as long as I've been here, and from what I hear, longer than that. But there was a downspout repair that was made probably 4 or 5 years ago that alleviated some of the major issues. Seemed to alleviate some of the major issue with moisture in the lower level. But I'm happy, any counselor certainly that wants to take a look at the memorial building, I'm happy to bring them through there and give you a tour. So I'm happy to you know, go over and take a visit for anybody who would like to do that.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
thank you. Mr. Dutton, I just want to roll through a series of kind of observations, questions, whatever you want to call them, and you can agree or disagree as you see fit. I think we need to have built into our annual budget the appropriate daily maintenance of buildings across the entire portfolio of buildings we own. Is that a fair statement? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then there's the, let's call it seasonal maintenance as opposed to daily, you know, switching out the HVAC to the heating system, et cetera, et cetera. Again, that needs to be something built into our budget every year for all of our buildings to take care of all of their needs. Right?
I would agree with that. It's not identified very specifically in your budget, but we do appropriate the money to make sure that we do certainly seasonal maintenance.
Right. So you see how I'm building it up, and now then we get into the something bad happened. Now we don't know what building it's going to happen to, but we can bet there's going to be 1 or 2 buildings where the toilets got broken or whatever else happened. Again, some sum of money ought to be built into our budget every year to accommodate the, something's always going to happen somewhere every year, and we need to, be able to point to that money and say, okay, yes, we've appropriated for that. Correct? Do you agree with that? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. And then there's the longer term issues of, we know eventually the Academy building is going to have to be re-sided or whatever, re-roofed. The other buildings are going to have larger projects done, not every year. Now, is it a preferable option to appropriate a little bit of money every year and put it into, forgive my old school language if I'm inappropriate, but a 103 account? That's a special expense that can be reserved year over year to accumulate up to when it will have to happen. We don't know exactly when, but it'll be there. And so is it something appropriate to put into the budget every year to say, all right, or are we going to rely on various reserve funds that we've been building up to say, well, if something major happens and we have to do something big to one of our buildings, we're just going to grab it from this reserve fund? Which would be your preferred approach?
I think quite honestly, and I'm not trying to compromise on this one, but I think a little bit of both, quite frankly. It's always good to budget money within an operating budget to make sure that you've got some money there to address very specific building issues. Certainly, I would agree with that. I would sort of suggest that that's something akin to sort of the finance reserve fund. So it's there. It's to cover unanticipated building needs, and that would be good.
This wouldn't be, in my mind, an unanticipated building need. It would be a building need we would know would happen, because we're not going to rely on the roof at Town Hall forever. We're not going to rely on the roof at the fire station forever. We're not going to rely on, the building integrity of the police station forever. We know we're going to have to do large projects at some point in the future. And so do we just wait and hope that there's money in the reserve fund, or do we build it up by saying, okay, let's put money aside every year for those particular expenses, and then we draw down on it strategically as we need to?
So that's, I think what you're describing is essentially what the sort of the finance process that we've gradually been moving towards. And if you recall, when the budget resolution is passed by the council, there's a provision in there that says, we're going to budget so that we are within some reasonable level of confidence assured that we'll have some money left over, so that excess money left over then funnels into the reserve accounts according to our free cash policy. And that's exactly the money that we try to maintain and build on a year-to-year basis. And then we know 5 years ahead of time where we anticipate build it, replace, if we have to replace the roof of the library, we're reasonably confident that we are going to be able to tap capital stabilization for that money, because we have set aside that money on an annual basis in an account exactly like you're talking about.
And so that essentially what those projects then need to be, if I'm hearing you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that those projects really need to be in the capital plan so that we see them coming out over a number of years, and that one may supersede another if something happens that, well, we know we're going to have to replace the roof on the library and the academy building and the town hall and the fire station, the police station, but we plan to do the library before we plan to do the police station, but the police station really needs it now, so let's do that. And that would be kind of your call at that point.
Right, and that's always the scenario that ends up being built into the process. Something we have done a very extensive and quite a lengthy capital plan this year, but you always are going to miss something. Something will come up that is not necessarily on the capital plan, or if it is on the capital plan, all of a sudden it becomes much more urgent because we had a windstorm and it blew a portion of the police station roof off, and that wasn't expected. So that'll bump that project up certainly to take priority over the library roof, to use your example. So
Right,
so
okay,
there's some
so-
flexibility that has to be built into the system.
Right. So now let's continue down this thought process. It would seem to me that the daily, seasonal, monthly, etc. projects and the annual ones that we know are going to happen need to be built into our annual budget and should require no Proposition 2.5 override, and certainly would not be eligible for debt exclusions, correct?
I'd say that's correct.
And so that has to just fit into what we know we can spend. And if we have to make choices, then we make choices, and that's our job. You present us with the alternatives and we make the choices, so to speak.
Correct.
So then the other projects that get into the bigger projects, where do you see the line being crossed as to various needs for getting to a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion, single year override, continuing override type of a question? And I don't want to put you on the spot now, so I'll just leave that as an open question. And when you come back at our next meeting, and I'll put this, Mr. President, on the agenda to talk about this very issue again. So I'd appreciate that. And with that, I'm kind of done on this issue. Thank you.
I got a question.
Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you. Just to kind of bring it down a little bit and talk about the big scheme of debt exclusions for maintenance, where the town manager basically started out by talking about the hiring of a facilities director or facilities manager. I do think that, remember, and I do think a lot of what should be happening in the maintenance department hasn't happened, and I do blame us for that. It's our fault, because we've had this position in the budget for several years. Not a lot of money, but at least enough to hire one person. And for what the town manager described, what they wanted this one qualified applicant to do, I don't believe the advertisement had a very high salary request, but you still got applicants. I don't know how many applicants you got, but from what you got, you only got one qualified applicant from your staff's perspective. So I hope that work continues and you continue to try to find, we need a body in the town, at least one. I think we need several, or at least a staff of a maintenance department in this town. And we haven't had that, and that's really on us. And we've seen it for 3 or 4 years, and it's been in the budget. And finally it got advertised, and I bet if you put it out there now, Mr. Dutton, there's a lot of people that are been laid off from various and different fields. You would get some probably more qualified candidates than you asked for. But I mean, I don't know when we're going to take it serious as far as having a staff to help. I mean, the town clerk, every time there's an election, she has no help to lug around these machines and set them up. She's looking for volunteers and she gets them. If somebody at the library needs a desk moved or something, we don't have a person to contact to do that. These are simple things, changing the annual lights and filters. Those are easy things to be done. The larger scale things, yeah, those will happen. I believe that the larger scale things, we've passed 3 capital budgets these past 3 fiscal years, and I'm sure a 4th one is coming. And there's a lot of money that's been appropriated for some of these bigger maintenance things. So we are working on the big picture, but I think we need to really focus more on the smaller picture. So hopefully, is the position now advertised, or are you screening new applicants now from the same field from before?
No, it's been re-advertised, so I'll make a plug. If anybody out there is interested, please review the advertising, and it's also on the town website, so you can always look at the town website, but it is there, so please take a look and And if it's appropriate, submit an application and we will put it through the process. Absolutely.
Any additional questions? All righty, moving on to election.
The November election, obviously we're anticipating quite a large turnout. I think the town clerk would agree with that. And I know we have been working with the clerk's office to make sure that certainly we do whatever we can to make sure that there's a seamless mail-in ballots, early voting we've talked about briefly, and then election day voting. So I know the assistant town manager is trying to look for a host of PPEs to make sure that we can keep the election workers and voters safe as they are coming in to vote. And we also have certainly, screening and plexiglass barriers and so forth that we're ready to utilize. We have also, I think, worked with the town clerk to develop a temporary assistance, temporary help, election day help, essentially to sort of help with the field operations, something I think that Councilor Gallagher was just sort of alluding to. We have to get away, quite frankly, we have to get away from relying on whoever the town clerk can arm twist into volunteering. We can't do that anymore for a number of reasons, among them, insurance reasons. Unfortunately, it's not the old days when it would be really, when you had plenty of volunteers who could lift and move tables and put up voting booths and so forth. Unfortunately, especially this year, that's not the case, and shouldn't probably be the case this year. Regardless, we are trying to go out and advertise. I'm not sure if Kim has put the advertisement out yet, but I think we just developed a job description for sort of that temporary help. I think there's at least 1 or 2 people who are very interested in that. Obviously, it's a paid position, probably something along the lines of the week before the election, making sure everything gets set up properly, and then obviously the day of the election, making sure that everything is in place, and so that the clerk's office can focus on the actual election and not the movement of equipment and tables and voting booths and so forth. So we are hopeful that that's going to work. I trust that will work, actually, and so we'll be off and going there. So I didn't know if there was something else on elections that you wanted to cover. But
I put that
certainly
on. I put that on, so I'll ask.
Yes, Mr. Gallagher.
I asked for this to be on because I had a couple of questions, and I'm not really too concerned about November 3rd, but what I wanted to ask about is leading up to November 3rd and the early voting. And as you alluded to in your COVID-19 update, that early voting is scheduled to take place in the Academy building, and I assume it's in the council chambers, and that the staff that's currently working, there'll be less staff working. I guess my question is why? Why would you send more staff home because of early voting going on in the town hall, in the Academy building, when at the same time you're going to start taking the public in for appointments during a 14-day early voting period? I guess I'm just like, are there, and I'm not advocating to start any problems or issues, but is the council chambers the most appropriate place to have early voting when you have a senior center that's been closed for 6 months, I guess? I mean, I'm just saying, things don't make sense here when we can't meet in the Academy building, the public can't come into the Academy building, but early voting, the doors are wide open. I think you're going to have one heck of a crowd early voting. This country is energized and they're paying attention. So I guess I'm hoping that a lot, and I'm sure the town clerk is putting 100 million hours into this thought process, and so is your staff, but I'm hoping that everything goes smoothly as far as early voting goes, because you will probably get more people vote prior to November 3rd than will vote on November 3rd. Either early voting, absentee, mail-in, those three combined will be more than you will see on November 3rd, in my view. Although I'll be voting November 3rd. So I guess I'm just concerned about the thought process there. If you're concerned about that, and I just, some of the things don't make sense to me as far as keeping the public out, but yet we'll let them in for early voting. I don't get it. So.
No, I think there's a lot of there are a lot of things during COVID that don't make sense, and I'll be the first one to admit that they don't make sense to me, and I'll also be the first to admit that having to be the one that's responsible for the employees and the obviously the safety and the welfare of all our employees, I vacillate literally day to day, sometimes hour to hour, whether or not just, open up the doors and let's get back to normal work, or, we have to be extra careful, because we are a host town to BSU, which invites in X thousands of people from out of town. I will tell you that in specific to the question about early voting and the possibility that there may be fewer people in the academy, and I'm not saying there will be, but it is likely that there would be fewer people working from the academy building during that time. And I can tell you that some of the drivers there are a number of staff, and obviously I'm not going to be specific, but a number of staff that may have pre-existing conditions or maybe in high-risk categories for contracting, in the event that they contract COVID, the severity could be greater. So we are extremely attentive to that, and so to the extent that there could be fewer staff in the building during those early voting hours, that's really the driving issue there. In terms of early voting in some other place, I'm always open to that possibility. I know the town clerk has a lot of concerns about doing something that is more off-site than the academy building, but I tend to agree. The library, although it's quote unquote open, it obviously they don't have patrons in the building all day. That's a possibility, and certainly senior center, which is a beehive of activity. Except for not inside the building with seniors, but certainly that's available. But I think, and my recollection isn't clear on why, but I think the town clerk was fairly adamant that it would be very difficult to move early voting, certainly at this stage, further away from the sort of the central office there. And that may in part be due to staffing as well. But to answer Councilor Gallagher's sort of overarching question, or concern, I agree. There's nothing, very little makes rational sense when it comes to COVID and different towns' responses, and quite frankly, our own response. Some of it seems to defy logic, but as I say, my primary concern is the health and safety of the employees first and foremost, and I want to make sure that we don't put anybody in harm's way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Wood.
Quick question, thanks. So I didn't realize that early voting was likely to happen up in the council chambers. Mr. Dutton, do you have a policy to limit the number of people in the elevator to 1 or 2?
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely. I believe it's 1 in the elevator unless it's a two-part, spouse or people that live together. But it's posted. The Academy building is all posted. The elevator is posted now with how many people are allowed in it. I just don't recall if it's 1 or 2. And there are markings on the floor that ensure appropriate spacing. And then we also limit the number of people that are allowed in the actual area to vote. And we did the same with early voting last for the primaries, which was on the first level as well. Hope that answers the question.
Okay. Any other questions? All righty, moving on to Halloween.
I haven't
Mr.
gotten
Gallagher
my,
doing his Halloween impersonation. Very nice.
I haven't purchased my costume yet.
No.
I can tell you with Halloween, I think, and I've gotten a couple of calls from counselors and some inquiries about whether the town was going to quote unquote, cancel Halloween. And short answer is no. But let me preface that by saying the CDC actually just issued guidelines about Halloween, about holidays in general, but certainly one of those provisions was about Halloween specifically. And those guidelines were endorsed, I think today on a weekly call with the Lieutenant Governor, so that the state is behind those guidelines. In particular, they point out that Halloween as trick-or-treating is a high-risk, quote-unquote, high-risk endeavor. But ultimately, I think residents certainly and parents will have to assess their own practices and review any alternatives that are available to them. We certainly will follow any state orders, but right now we plan to provide everybody with probably is more information than they could possibly digest, but we want to make sure that we give people access to all the information that we have access to, and let people make up their own minds about whether they want their kids out trick-or-treating or whether they want to participate as homeowners or renters in trick-or-treating. So as I said, we have no plan to ban trick-or-treating, but we certainly will begin to push out information, more and more information as we get into October about trick-or-treating.
Any questions for Mr. Dutton?
I have a question. It's Councillor Loesch. Mr. Dutton, is Halloween a town-sanctioned day? Is there a reason why the town has to have input on if I decide to go outside for candy or not?
Nope, the Halloween is not a town-sanctioned day. It's not a state-sanctioned. It's not certainly not a federal holiday. So we really don't have any particular role in telling people what they can and can't do at all. And in fact, I asked the police chief if the town had ever, quote unquote, canceled trick-or-treating, and he could recall once back in, I think it was the 1990s, when the prison had an escapee on the loose, and that was the only time that he could ever remember that the town had actually taken any kind of position on trick-or-treating. So no, it's not a town sponsored anything.
And to follow up on that, Mr. President, I apologize for breaking in. That particular day, I think it was in the mid-90s, but I still had people showing up at my door wanting candy, so I gave it to them. So even though it was recommended by the police and the DOC that people not trick or treat, they went out.
Mr. Souza. You're on mute, Mr. Souza.
That little bugger. We go.
Okay.
You know? All right.
Yep.
6 o'clock news, the governor said, if I'm quoting him right, that there'll be no trick-or-treating, there will be no large indoor parties, and what he is recommending is maybe just family things, and maybe if they wanted to have like an outdoor Easter egg hunt thing where they're outside, they can keep their distance. That's what he said tonight at the 6 o'clock news for the state.
I would be very interested to see how that's enforced.
Mr. George, if I may, as we are still probably a month and a half, maybe 2 months, I guess a month and a half away at this point, maybe we wait to see what that guidance is for the next meeting. Will be a little bit closer. It may just make some sense for Mr. Dutton to weigh in at that point in time if the governor has made some executive orders on it. I do know that the CDC did come out with some guidance today. What that trickles down to state level, who knows, right? So it may just make some sense for him to touch base on that again and have that on the agenda again for the next October meeting.
Yeah, I mean, it technically, and I'm looking at the calendar now, we'll have 2 meetings before Halloween, so we'll have some time. Any additional questions? All right, town webpage Code 360.
Code 360 is, for those that don't know, is a program that many towns use to sort of house their the town code, but town meeting form of government used to house their bylaws, their zoning bylaws. This is something we have looked at. We looked at it several years ago. It is something that I think would work well in Bridgewater. When we did the admin code, we kind of tried to start laying it out so it would easily translate into a 360 type program. E360 is a sort of a brand name, but it would be easily translated into a 360 type program. And at that time when we talked to them, they encouraged us. I was reminded today they encouraged us to get in place what we want to get in place. So, the charter obviously is in place, the admin code, and zoning. So we're waiting to actually get that zoning piece done. And then we can give that whole package to as I say, an EC 360 type program so that they can plug that into their structure. And I think Councillor Wood had mentioned a while back that that it's not the format it's in now is not easily searchable, and that's one of the benefits, obviously, of the E360 format, is that it's all very easily searchable. So it's word searchable, and brings up whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for manhole covers and anything the town has on manhole covers, you can put that in and it pops right up. So so that is something we're looking at. We haven't committed to it just yet because we are kind of waiting to get that last piece of the zoning done, and at that point we can ship it off and have it translated into something a little bit better than it currently is. It would all be housed on our website, by the way. It wouldn't be a separate issue. So I hope that sort of addresses whatever the question was on that one.
Mr. Wood?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, Mr. Dutton, you hit a lot of the top points. And as as our attorney last week said, we need to support legislation that has money behind it to support any changes. So it'd be good to get some guidance on that, and then we can put together something. As you said, a lot of towns use it. I've done a lot of research in other towns. The current admin code in the town, the link is right off of your page, but it's a 302-page document. On page 302, it says, it's going to have zoning, and that was 2017. And then we've got a couple items tonight that'll probably affect the admin code. So I imagine it would make it simpler for your office and staff to be able to edit one small section or insert one small section every time we make an amendment to zoning or our code of ordinances, or the charter for that matter. So yeah, it'd be good to see some tracking progress on this, and finance information about what it would cost, and maybe bring it up again in another meeting or two.
Perfect.
Any additional questions? Okay. Reach out to the town manager for items for our next meeting. While I have you, Mr. Dutton, what I'd like to do for our next meeting, and maybe this is under presentations, is actually dovetail off the October 5th meeting of the Fire Station Building Committee. Have the committee come in and just give an update. That is, correct me if I'm wrong, the second largest capital expenditure that we're going to have in the last 3 or 4 years, the first being the Mitchell. So I know that there's still a lot more work to do, but I'd like to give people at least an update of where it sits. And then more importantly, what is the time frame? What are some of the expectations going forward so that we have something that's firm, we know what the cost is and what next steps are.
That sounds perfect. We'll have a little bit more information after the October 5th meeting, and that's so it'll be timely and fresh. The only thing, if I could, just one last thing from my perspective.
Hold on, if it's not on this, I don't want Attorney Rollins to yell at me. So
no, he told me it's okay to say this.
Okay.
Not true.
Whoa! I might have to object right here. Go right ahead, Mr. Dunn.
I just a reminder, not only, if there's something that is useful for public consumption or is helpful for the public, absolutely, please give me those items and we'll dig into them and I'll cover them in my town manager's update. If there's just a question that you want to ask, just please feel free to text me or call me. I'm always available to the council. Well, maybe not 3 in.the morning, but almost always available to the council. I'm happy to answer any specific questions that constituent asks or what have you. So happy to do that. But if it's something for the greater public, absolutely put it on for a town manager's report.
Great. All righty. We don't have anything for discussion. Are there any committee reports? Anyone like to do a quick report on committee activity? Okay.
Yes. This is
Mrs. Loesch?
Yes. So the review committee met last week to discuss the review process. So here we are. We created this committee, I think, at the end of last year to ensure that we had timely and frequent review processes from Mr. Dutton. We have done it in the past, but what ends up happening just from a timing and meeting perspective, by the time we actually update the year's goals, it's near May. So then we're looking at evaluating his performance on those goals from May to roughly this time, because now we're starting to do the evaluation for Q4. So we have the evaluation that you all should be familiar with because we've done it in previous years and it's also been voted upon by the council. What the committee will be doing is setting up a timeline and ensuring that the process will start going out. So beginning in October, you'll start to get the request for information. We will be finalizing, ensuring that we have completed all the parts. I know in previous years we've reached out to department heads, other years we have not. So looking to streamline it and perhaps even getting a process outlined directly into our code, our rules and procedures. So therefore it removes the lack of clarity or the differences of remembering how things went and just having it laid out from, step 1 to step 10, as well as a suggested guideline from timing. The only thing there that we were also looking forward to, and I know it was touched on in the town manager's update, is looking for our updated goals for 2021 for the town manager. That does not come from this committee, but want to ensure that as we provide the review in Q4, that we have an opportunity to have those goals be ready as well, so that when we start in January, at least February, we'll get a few months back and have a longer window to have time for evaluation against those. So that is a quick update there. The review committee is in progress, so if anyone has any questions or inputs, please feel free to reach out and I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Moving on to legislation for action. Ordinance DFY 20-009, General Ordinance, amend Administrative Code, Article 2, Section 1B, and Article 3, Section 1I. At their meeting held on August 18, 2020, the Rules and Procedures Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this measure with proposed amendments. The Town Council adopted proposed amendments on September 8, 2020. This measure has been duly advertised in the Enterprise and on the town's website, therefore may be finally considered this evening. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So
Make
moved.
that motion.
Mr. President, I just have one quick comment on this. If you all, prior to entering into your discussion and possibly contemplating any amendments, if you look at Article 3, Section 1, Number 3 as constituted, that works very well, but I think there may be something that needs to be added to the end of that, where it says who would be ineligible to serve under Mass General Laws, Chapter 268A, and or the Town of Bridgewater Town Charter. The only reason I say that is you want to make sure, because this is an ordinance and not an amendment to the charter, that it just works in concert with the charter. So that would be my recommendation. If anyone wants to make that amendment, certainly it is up to you all. But I would recommend that just to make sure it's clear that this is working in concert as the admin code, as opposed to being a change to the charter.
Make that amendment.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion?
On the amendment?
Yes.
None.
So, Mr. Rollins, do we need, if this passes, do we have to re-advertise it again?
No, it doesn't change. Yeah, it doesn't change anything substance-wise. It's really just to make sure it's clear that this is working in concert with the town charter. So it's just a technicality.
Okay. Any additional questions
On the amendment?
on the amendment?
None.
Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yeah.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
That passes. Now we're back to the main motion to approve as amended. It's been,
Mr. President, discussion on that?
Okay,
I believe Mr. Gallagher got the same email as I did around allowing property owners in town to also serve on committees. And I'd just like the town attorney's opinion on that before I may or may not offer an amendment.
Yeah, I had loosely heard about that, and I'm happy to do some further digging, but I think that as written in the charter and as we have practiced and as is typically the practice anywhere, you need to be a resident of the town in which you serve on a committee, council, board. So I think it's based on residency, and I think it should remain based on residency for a whole litany of issues. Otherwise, frankly, my business is in the town of Bridgewater, so I suppose I could be a town councilor. Not that I would want to be, but from
I wouldn't want you to be.
yeah, I don't envy any of
Way too cautious.
So I think the residency requirement is actually a very important one, and I think it should remain as is currently constituted to avoid.
Okay, thank you. That's what I assumed the answer was. I just wanted to make sure if the person who sent the email was watching on Facebook Live or wherever tonight that we did address it. So I'm not going to offer any amendments. Thank you.
Any additional discussion? Mr. Gallagher?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to reiterate is, yeah, I had a few conversations with the gentleman that sent that email to us, and I kind of explained to him exactly what Attorney Rollins was saying, is that, I would not be in favor of allowing, non-residents of a town to serve on a board. But the underlying issue that this gentleman had was he kind of lives here but doesn't live here. But and I say, well, that's a gray area. And the question really is where do you sleep the most? Where are you most of the time? So I think he understood that. So, but yeah, he understands that non-residents cannot, under the current charter, and serve on the town. So I'm comfortable with that.
In the past, and as is typically the case, and I think when the charter was initially written, it's a registered voter, and I think it's for that reason, right? I think it's essentially saying, listen, you gotta choose, and this is where you are, this is where you vote, this is where you can engage in your municipal civic activities, and I think that's a very standard type of clause in any charter or constitution, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Any city and town I've ever lived in, you had to be a resident in order to be on a board or committee. Any additional discussion? Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay. Moving on to item B, ordinance D FY 21-002, general ordinance, SFI paperwork reduction, creation of an SFI short form. At their meeting held on August 18, 2020, the Rules and Procedures Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this measure. This measure has been duly advertised in the enterprise and on the town's website, therefore may be finally considered this evening. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just, I hope there's some support for this. It doesn't change the content of what you're reporting on the SFI. It just simplifies how you're reporting it, making it simpler for the administration of the paperwork. Many of us that have lived in town live in the same house for a long time. People that are on boards for 3, 5, 7 years are filling out the same paperwork multiple times, and the long form is very long. So this is just an effort to make it simpler for everyone involved. Doesn't change the content of what's being reported. Thanks.
Any additional comments? Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay, moving on to item C, order O FY 21-012, World War I guardrail flagpole repair. At their meeting held on August 25th, 2020, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this measure. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 to recommend approval at their meeting held on September 1st, 2020. On September 8th, 2020, this measure was postponed pending amendments. This measure may finally be considered this evening pending the adoption of any proposed amendments. I will entertain a motion to approve the amendments.
Mr. President, point of
Yes.
order. I think we should make a motion to approve the order and then make a motion to amend.
Was that a motion to approve, Tim? Because
I'll second the
I asked a
motion.
point of order, but I'll make a motion to approve if the president will accept it.
I'll accept it as long as it's within order. Mr. Rollins, are we good with that?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay. All right, so we got a motion. Is there a second to approve?
Second.
I'll make a motion to amend as indicated.
Second.
Okay.
To
We
amend.
got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the amendments? Okay, the amendment, approval on the amendments requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Any discussion on the main motion? Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
thank you, Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay, item D, order O FY 20-013, creation of an ad hoc committee for community diversity, inclusion and equity. The Rules and Procedures Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval at their meeting on September 17, 2020. This measure may be finally considered this evening. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I thought I'd hear some discussion on this, and I guess I didn't. I know Councilor Loesch spoke out quite passionately in her council comments against it at our last meeting, and it's completely up to Councilor Loesch whether she wants to speak or not, but I certainly was informed and influenced by it, so I'll just leave it out there. I'm prepared to vote, but no one needs to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgibbons. I mean, I to your point, thank you. I feel like I've said what I had to say. I shared a job posting of what I believe the role could look like perhaps in the future, or, you know, what it could be shaped to, what could fit the town. You know, this isn't the first time I will be outnumbered by the majority, so happy to move forward with the vote.
Well, that's always what happens when you're outnumbered. I actually do have a follow-up question then for a couple of things to the sponsors, if I may, Mr. President.
If I could,
And Mr. Rushton, I believe you're a sponsor, so you may be able to answer the question. What was viewed as the purpose of this ad hoc committee?
so if I could, just to go back to your first comment with Council Loesch, the comments made at the last town council meeting, I think it might be important for the town manager to sort of comment on this. We've had some discussions about, you know, what this ad hoc committee would look like, inclusion of, you know, sort of competing groups that are out there and making sure that it's done right. So if I would probably defer through the president to the town manager, if you could just talk about our discussion about the funding to make sure that we put this committee together and form a full committee and have somebody that, you know, professional background that works in this field to help guide the committee.
Oh, hold on. That jumped about 5 steps ahead of where I was. I thought this was a committee of citizens to help advise us and the town manager on this. I didn't realize we're actually now asking for funding. So could you point to me where it says that in the order?
I'm going to defer to Councilor Gallagher because it looks like he wants to answer probably the first part, and then I'll follow up with the second piece.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Gallagher.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. This is, again, this is just in its infancy stage here. This is just the beginning of a process that will probably may lead to perhaps, as Council Loesch sent to us today, a position within the town at some point. But I put this together and had Mr. Rushton asked him to, he asked to sponsor this to begin the process of looking into the diversity and inclusion and equity in our community. So what better place to start than to look at our own citizens to give us some advice and put together some sort of guidelines as to what a permanent committee within the town code might look like. So that's where I'm looking to go with this.
Okay, so Mr. Gallagher, you're not looking to spend any money with this at the moment?
I would say the ad hoc committee may decide that they need an expert or something to come in, or not, I don't mean to use the word expert, but to use maybe a professor or someone that's involved in towns that have already, or businesses or so forth, that have already established this type of committees within their organizations, to give them advice. Whether they do it freely or as a consultant, I don't know, but that's up to the ad hoc committee. So I don't expect the ad hoc committee to be spending a lot of money, if any, because I would like to see their work done within a short period of time. And then it'll come back to us and to develop, hopefully they would have developed what a permanent committee within the town administrative code will look like. But they may come up with other things. I'm seeing now on the MMA website, many towns adopting similar things that we are doing. And I've already printed them out and I'm ready to hand them over once this committee ad hoc starts, to say, look, this is what Plymouth is doing, or this is what Natick is doing, or Framingham, to begin the process of looking at, recognizing, and see what some of the issues are in our community relative to diversity, inclusion, and equity.
Mr. Columbotus?
Mr. President, can I just follow up on that?
Actually, I think, Mr. Columbotus, you had something to add?
I do, but I'll defer to Mr. Rushton, let him.
Okay, Mr. Rushton.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I agree with everything that Councilor Gallagher is mentioning. However, I think one of the concerns here is that the ad hoc committee, and then later maybe a full committee, needs to have some type of professional guidance in this area. So the town is already working with someone through the assistant town manager to look at employment, this issue in our employment perspective, but is an expert in this area. I think the word is a consultant, to help the ad hoc committee come up with a final proposal to the town, one that has been vetted professionally. And I know that there's many people in town that, obviously want to help with this committee, and it is important, but I think it's also important that it's vetted against national and state best practices about how we proceed. And I think possibly that was really the concern of putting this committee together and having a bunch of competing ideas without any real guidance. And I don't think that we have anybody in town that's a real expert at this. So in conversations with Michael, we already have someone, what I believe to be on retainer, helping the town through our employment practice. And my hope was that this same consultant could sort of help the ad hoc committee come up with a final proposal to bring back to the council. And to Councilor Gallagher's point, I don't think that we're talking, a ton of money, but I think that the ad hoc committee right out of the outset should know that they have that resource available to them to guide them through the process. And I hope that sort of clarifies it.
So let me have a point of information for Mr. Dutton. So Mr. Dutton, we put this ad hoc committee together, and within a short period of time, they come back to you and say that they do need some financial resources. Is there a mechanism for us to be able to fund that, or does that have to go within the order right now?
No, that does not have to go within it. Probably not appropriate to put that in the order right now. But if in that event, if the ad hoc committee came back and said, you know what, we need some guidance, we need some professional guidance. Obviously we live in Bridgewater and we know what goes on in Bridgewater, and we know what we want to address, but we need some guidance into how to effectively address that, so that we have a proposal to the council that's comprehensive and logical and makes sense and is legal and so forth. At that point, then I would submit a funding order, an appropriation order, and we would probably, Obviously, I haven't talked to the finance director about this, but we would probably take that out of sort of our one-time fund. And I wouldn't anticipate that being a budget buster by any means, but that's probably the source of the funding.
And
Mr. Rollins?
if I may, yeah, just to kind of piggyback on that, I don't actually think in you all creating an ad hoc committee here that the conversation about Mr. Dutton's, potential employment of someone or potential bringing forward with you all an appropriation for the employment of someone to assist with that probably makes sense at this point. I think what should be happening is the ad hoc committee, if that's what you all decide you want to put forward, does seek that. They should be having direct conversations with the town manager, who then should be putting appropriation orders before you all for a vote, right? So I don't think it's appropriate for it to go into this current order as it's stated, nor really any order that comes from the council. I think the council can create this committee. This committee can say, hey, look, we need a professional to help us out with, kind of working through this, right? There's a lot of factors here. And if Mr. Dutton is able with finance to find the means and certify that to you all and put forward an appropriation that shows how these things can get paid for, I think that's the course that it should take. And certainly if there are no funds to do that, that's a different story, right? That's not for me to decide, but I think just procedurally, that's really the course to take.
Okay. Mr. Rushton, did you have something?
Oh, that was it. That was my final comment. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wood.
Mr. George?
I'm just,
Did Mr.
I-
Columbotus ever go?
No, I was hoping to defer just to Mr. Rushton and not the string of people who spoke after him.
All right, well, I apologize. Mr.
Right.
Columbotus, do you have anything to add?
I'm just concerned that the creation of this ad hoc committee would kind of minimize the impetus to seek that professional direction and capacity that probably would be a whole lot more effective in addressing this complex issue than a committee of well-intentioned, though not all that knowledgeable. I mean, of course they bring knowledge, but expertise in dealing with these complicated issues. If I could direct a question to Mrs. Loesch. I'm curious what sort of, how you think this process, I recognize in your email you said that, well, you cited the town of Everett is advertising for a professional director to address diversity. You recognize that perhaps we don't want to go that far. What measures short of that would you recommend in contrast to this move to form an ad hoc committee? What would you suggest? I mean, I understand you do have some professional expertise in this issue, Mrs. Loesch, so perhaps
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
and I will completely allow Mrs. Loesch to answer the question if she'd like to, but I'd like to keep the topic on the order actually in front of us rather than saying, what should we do differently? If things need to be done differently, then anyone can offer an amendment to do something differently.
I think we should have the discussion if there is anything we should do differently before we do an amendment. So, Mrs.
Okay.
Loesch, would you like to have input?
Sure. Pete, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, just specifically, if you don't see this creation of the ad hoc committee to be the best plan forward, what would you suggest? I understand you have some expertise in diversity issues professionally.
Yes, thank you, Pete. So this is what I do for a living. I'm vice president and director for diversity and inclusion for Publicis Group, which is the third largest communication firm in the world. And I do this for 26,000 people on a daily basis. So thank you for acknowledging that. What I've said in the previous meetings and previous comments, this is not the way to create a strategy. The same way we wouldn't go to the finance committee without a CFO to tell them what to do with $67 million, to say, what do you all well-intentioned community folks think that we should do with this money, versus having someone with expertise in financial management run that process. But We had voted, I think, 8-1 in previous meetings to move this forward to the Rules and Procedures Committee. They have voted 3-0 to move and recommend for approval. I wish this committee luck. I'm happy to help. But this is a committee before a committee, to be clear. This is an ad hoc committee. This is not a standing committee. This has a short timeline of 6 months. And then from there, they would recommend either creating a committee or hiring someone. And that could be done within rules and procedures. That could be done within this council of 9. That could be done in multiple other ways than having 7 people give us a recommendation on what they think without actually having any professional expertise in this space. But again, I don't want to, I'm not one to belabor my points and to repeat them after they've been made. So that's kind of where we are with my, pieces of information on this. So I'm actually happy to move the question if there's no other conversation to be had.
I'll second that.
Okay. This requires a roll call vote.
On moving the question only.
Correct.
And it requires a 2/3 majority to move the question.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgibbons.
No, I'm asking the question. I'm sorry.
It does.
That was a question mark.
Yes. That is
Point of information, which I think takes precedence over moving.
Mr. Rollins, I think point of information does not trump moving the question, correct?
I don't believe so. No, I don't have my chart of parliamentary procedure directly in front of me, but moving the question typically takes precedence.
Right. I'm pretty sure on that.
I just never
So
got to turn. That's okay.
Roll call vote for moving the question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Chase. Mr. Chase, you're muted.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
We move on to voting to approve. Which requires a roll call vote.
Point of information. Is this appropriate now?
I believe so, yes.
I just have a question on the content of the purpose. And I want to make sure I'm clear on the purpose of the order. So the purpose is to set up a committee.
Mr. President, point of order.
Right?
This is actually continuing debate,
Right.
which is not
Yep.
allowed.
Right. They move the question, so it has to be voted on.
Okay.
Requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
No.
Mr. Columbotus,
No.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
No.
Mr. Chase,
No.
Mrs. Loesch,
No.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
4 in favor, 5 against.
Okay. All right, items E, F, and G, we will have to postpone till our next meeting because the Finance Committee was not able to meet to discuss. All righty. Moving on to old business, we don't have any new business. Ordinance D, FY 21-003, zoning ordinance, zoning map amendment, Pleasant Street. I'll entertain a motion to refer to the planning board and the CDC for joint public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second. Any discussion? Okay, requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay. Moving on to citizens' comments. Again, asking to keep it within 3 minutes or less. Are there any citizens who would like to comment? And I don't see anyone, do you?
No, I don't. I'm scrolling through one more time. I do not.
Okay. Move to council comments. I will start with Mr. Fitzgibbons.
If I could, Mr. President, and indulge a moment of your time, I know we always take a moment to honor any veterans who have passed at the beginning of the meeting, but I was just informed a friend of several of ours passed very recently. Mr. Tom Moran, who was a teacher at the middle school for years. I never had him, nor did I have his wife, Gloria, but they were very good friends, friends of my family for a long time. So if we could please have a moment of silence for Tom Moran, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And the only other thing I would add, and I'm sure Tom would want me to say this, is we've opened up school. We've got hybrid, we've got full-time, some kids going in full-time 4.5 days a week, some kids going hybrid, some kids online all the time. And the teachers are doing their best to figure it out. And let's all give them a break for a while to figure it out, because this has never happened before. So, you know, they're working for the best interest of our kids. Let's recognize that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Souza?
Let's get back in town hall. Thank you.
Mr. Columbotus?
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Mrs. Loesch?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Mr. Rushton?
Nothing, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Wood?
Yeah, I just want to keep reminding everybody to stay safe. We're moving into colder weather. You know, eat outside, bundle up, you know, try to stay safely distanced. My comment earlier about the elevator is an important one. We're gonna see, you know, additional challenges here as we go through the next couple months. So please do everything you can to keep Bridgewater safe. Thanks.
Mr. Gallagher?
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Chase?
I'd just like to say that it is National Voter Registration Day, and we've already discussed the upcoming election previously tonight, but just to remind folks that voter registration, the best time to accomplish that if you are not currently a registered voter or you're not sure of your status, this is indeed the best time to address that. And I would strongly urge everyone to do it, and do it at the earliest opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. Did I miss any counselors? Okay. I don't have any comments tonight. So we do have an executive session, MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. If the chair declares that an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body.
Motion to go into executive session per that subsection.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. Rushton?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
9 in favor, none against. Oh, did somebody say that we would adjourn from executive session?
No, but I'll make that amendment motion, whatever we need to do.
Thank you very much. Okay, 9 in favor, none against.
All right. Well,
So-
thank you for the public for joining. And Ann will do her magic to get us into executive session.
Stand by.